Hey there, I'm Zach Abramowitz, and I'm Legally Disrupted. On episode 28 of Zach Abramowitz's Legally Disrupted, we've got the second edition of Zach and Richard's excellent legal AI adventure with my good friend Richard Tromans from Artificial Lawyer. On this episode, we got right into it about the news of Eudia launching an Arizona law firm. Is this newsworthy? Is it not? Is this more of the same? Are these AI first or full stack law firms going to be more interesting than the software that's being sold to some of the incumbents? We get into all that and more. Let's get disrupted. So I wanted to talk about something that I think is getting a lot of attention that you flagged yesterday, that you've written about, and get us kicked off, because I'm sort of surprised at the amount of attention that this Eudia announcement is getting. So just for our listeners who may not be familiar, Eudia, started by Omar Haroon, founder of TextIQ, which sold previously to Relativity. If you meet Omar, you'll be very impressed with him. He's very, very charismatic. It feels like he gives you the impression that every company he builds, he's going to sell, and he has like a great aura of success around him. And he has built a product that was really focused, when he told me about it, on Fortune 500 CLOs. But since they've kind of merged into this quote unquote AI native or AI first law firm. So tell us a bit about that, because you wrote about that this week.
Yeah. I mean, basically, it makes total sense. So they started off providing sort of AI skills and, depending on who you listen to, a degree of sort of agentic workflow support as well for in-house legal teams, which was great. They could have just stayed there. Then they had a whole ton of VC money, and they've used some of that to buy Johnson Hannah, which is an ALSP based in Ireland, but does a lot of work globally, works for very, very large companies all around the planet. And buying an ALSP as an AI company first is really interesting. Now, it's not the first legal tech company to have an ALSP. If you remember, for those of you who are old like us, Thomson Reuters had Pangea 3, which had been sold some time ago. So it's not the very first legal tech company to own its own ALSP, but it's certainly one of the very few to ever do that. Now, its latest move is to actually have a law firm, inverted commas, in Arizona, which is, as everyone knows, a special area in terms of regulation, and you can have an external party that's not a law firm owning that business.
Right, non-lawyer ownership of law firms, which is
exactly.
You know, I think we're one of the things that like came up, a bit at ILTACon, because this topic came up, is could we see legal go down a similar route that medical practices have gone in the last, at least in the U.S. over the last 5-10 years. We've seen private equity buy a ton of medical practices.
Now, on the private equity side, I mean, that's a whole different subject we can come to. Let's do that next, which is private equity. But private equity there's a whole ton of roll-up strategies going on, even in Sweden, amazingly. We were just talking about Sweden off camera. But going back to Eudia, the interesting thing there is that effectively what we've had in the past are ALSPs that have brought in AI skills to improve their contract group, right? I mean, the ones who are very, very much focused on e-discovery, these kind of like, sort of e-discovery shops, you might want to call it. Well, they've existed for years and years. Ever since e-discovery got going as a subject, there have been groups of people with trained sort of, e-discovery experts working with the technology like Relativity and whatever, right? That makes, everyone understands that. Yep. What is kind of new is moving into the transactional side. Now, we've had ALSPs who've had large groups of individuals working through, sort of like, contract templates, contract playbooks and so forth, right? But adding AI makes total sense. And it's something I've been pushing ever since 2016. They got very, very little uptake. I remember talking to some people who actually owned and ran their own ALSPs and like really trying to say, why don't you use all these new NLP tools. This was back in
and by the way, and to a certain extent, some of them did, right? Like
a little bit.
ALSP, Axiom, excuse me. Axiom was working at some point before they did their entire reorg, where they created Knowable and right. But they were working originally with a mix of Kira and Heretic. And then also there are people involved as well. And then if you look at like a lot of the key ALSPs, a lot of them at least purported to be using either eBrevia or they were dabbling. Yeah.
They were dabbling. And one of the problems was, of course, is that the NLP, before getting too technical, the old fashioned NLP machine learning approach works to a certain extent. And this is where it gets interesting. Now, Law Geeks, for those of you with really, really good memories, Law Geeks was actually one of the very, very first legal AI companies. Yeah. One of the very, very, very first.
Based right out of here, based out of Israel. So I knew them well.
Exactly. Yeah. But when, obviously, because different market size, went straight to the US because that's where they thought they would pick up the most work. And interestingly, they opened their own law firm, inverted commas. Also, I think it was in Utah, not Arizona, because Utah is also another special state in terms of regulation. And this was because some of the things that they did came under the umbrella of regulated activities. I'm using the English terminology here. It's called regulated activities. And so this was before they kind of, how can we put it politely, restructured, right? And different parts were sold off to different parts and other parts remained, but rebranded. It's an interesting idea that, so effectively Eudia, and I didn't mention this in the story, but it kind of came to me after I'd written it, that to some degree, Eudia is actually following the Law Geeks playbook, right? Because the first thing that Law Geeks did initially, they thought that AI will solve all the problems, right? And then they realized it wasn't good enough. Then they started to build out an army of people who would do it manually with AI. So that's your ALSP bit. And then they got to this point where some of the clients were saying, well, we need you to do X, Y, Z to make this really effective. And their compliance advisors said, well, you're going to need to be in a regulated environment because you cannot do some of this stuff with just paralegals. So they had to do the thing in Utah. Now, for whatever the financial reasons was that didn't work, maybe it was because generative AI wasn't around. Maybe if Law Geeks had survived long enough to see the arrival of Gen AI, it would be what Eudia is today. But anyway, so
listen, there were a lot of pioneers that got eaten by bears, and then people afterwards that came were like, okay, listen, so I need to avoid that bear.
Well, look at
Law Geeks was ahead of its time, honestly.
Seal did pretty well. They made some, but again, one of the very, very first legal AI companies. Seal, unlike most of them, was very much focused on the in-house world. They did some really, really pioneering work, made great headway, were bought up by DocuSign. People I know there say there's very little left of Seal. Yeah. Very little left now. It is fun, actually, as another subject we could talk about, is what is left of so many of these large M&A transactions. I mean, what is left of Casetext? What is left of Henchman, right? Insiders tell me very, 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 very little left of these companies inside the companies that bought them.
I want to pick up on your Law Geeks point, and then I want to go back to the Eudia point and try to figure out why this appears to be getting so much news. So the Law Geeks point is just they were absolutely ahead of their time.
Law Geeks was ahead of its time on
Law Geeks was they were way ahead of their time, and what they and it started off when they created Law Geeks. The idea that Nuri Bechor had was that this was going to be a consumer product that in 2000, I remember one of their people telling me in 2015, it simply doesn't make any sense to sign a contract when you don't know what's in it today and without having to consult a lawyer. The problem I think that Law Geeks ran into is they figured out, and it took them a long time to figure this out, but effectively, the reason you hire an attorney is not equivalent to what it is the attorney does, right? Meaning you hire an attorney because you just want to say, hey, did the attorney bless this? Say it's kosher. Say it's good to go. Can I sleep? What the attorney actually does is compare it to the four most recent precedents they happen to have that they feel are relevant to you, but that's not why you hire them. And so yes, LawGeeks was actually doing a lot of the work that a lawyer might do on those agreements, but it didn't solve the kind of like real reason that people hire an attorney.
Well, no, and also they quickly found out that they needed volume. I remember speaking to them as well very early 26, just after I launched, actually. In fact, they were one of my very first sponsors, advertisers. So I will always have a special, LawGeeks will always have a special place in my heart because they actually helped me get going. So it's a shame that they're no longer with us. Well, there is some weird leftover, some kind of remnants that does still exist. So I suppose we should be careful there. But as we knew them, they're certainly not as we knew them. Anyway, the thing is, I remember them saying to me, like a cycle courier. If a cycle courier was given a contract but didn't understand it, they could use LawGeeks. And I was thinking, like, a cycle courier? You're going to like run a business based off revenue from cycle couriers? And of course, that didn't last very long. Soon they moved into large corporates. But then, of course, we ran into that earlier point, as mentioned, which was accuracy. Is that the NLP at the time just wasn't cutting it, wasn't good enough, not enough. Right. Or a large corporate to because it was this weird situation where it was like, well, look, if you're actually going to take this off our hands, if you're going to take these contract reviews off our hands properly, completely, well, you've got to finish the job. And if you don't finish the job, then why are we using you? Because you're basically just pinging it back, 75% done. And then we've got to find out where you got to, and then finish it ourselves. And it's kind of like, well, why bother?
I remember speaking to Mark Harris, the founder of Axiom. It must have been 2017, 2018. And he explained to me that we at Axiom, when we heard about Seal Software, we were very bullish and we wanted to partner with them. And then when we got to Seal Software, we realized it didn't work. And it didn't.
I've got good friends who started that company, and I would say it did work. It just perhaps didn't meet the sort of very, very high expectations that people had back in 2016 when they heard the term.
Correct.
AI. They went, "Oh my god!" We just go beep, and it's perfect. Wasn't. And of course, we're still not there, are we? Even now, even in 2025, the sort of beep perfect.
Right.
We're still not there.
But his opinion at the time, which I think is true, but maybe less true today, was that you simply couldn't create a contract review product that didn't involve people. And what's interesting is the Eudia announcement, the whole Eudia business model is very much in line with that kind of thinking, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is the great irony, and all AI companies have found this to some extent, and it's very interesting as well the way that if you look at, I say, OpenAI is providing to some degree some level of sort of consulting input now for the large enterprises, right?
Yeah.
So this whole idea of you plug it in and off you go, I don't think it's ever really been that true. I mean, if you're willing to accept, a degree of error. But of course, in the legal dimension, that's pretty difficult to do. So basically, every AI company I've met in the legal space at some point has realized, our software is not enough. Now we're going to have to add either a whole bunch of caveats along the lines of, well, you're going to have to build your own team to deal with the final output, or we're going to have to build one for you. So look at Robin AI, for example.
You took them right off my tongue. I think they're a great example. And but make your point, and I'll jump on it afterwards.
Robin AI started off. I mean, Richard Robinson. His idea was quite simply, let's build an ALSP with AI in the middle of it. And they started using NLP. Didn't get particularly good results. They were very, very early in the Gen AI game, ALSP Gen AI game, and they made good friends with Anthropic, and they brought it in, and they did extremely well. But they have had to build their own internal ALSP. Like, they've had to retain it. They didn't say, okay, now we've got the AI, we've trained up the AI, we've got great models, great refinements, etc. We don't need all these people anymore. They have kept them. And they don't seem to be going away at all.
Oh, no, not at all. Have you been to their UK office?
Not recently, no.
All right, they've got a whole area where that team sits. And I've said this to them. I don't think they like necessarily drew it up this way, but I think that they are one of the first examples of a flipped paradigm AI first law firm. And they don't work with any other law firms. They work entirely with corporates. By the way, I think this is a true pattern just sort of in general.
I think they do actually work with some small law firms.
So there are some law firms that I think have essentially come to them and said, like, work with us because we're losing work to you. But my point is, those companies like Robin, I don't think are necessarily experiencing Harvey style growth.
No,
but I think that it's nothing to be sneezed at, and I do think that ultimately that revenue could prove to be more sustainable.
Well, it's a very different model. It's more like a law firm model because, you know, like if you're a 1,000 lawyer law firm and you want to buy 1,000 seats of Harvey, Legora, or whatever it is, well, that's a ton of money, right? Over let's say a 3-year contract, right? Everyone has, like maybe only 20% of the firm really, really becomes power users of that technology. On the ALSP AI side, this hybrid law firm, whatever you want to call it, it's a very, very different business model. You basically eat what you kill, right? Pieces of work come in, right? You don't sell seats. I mean, you can sell seats, but it's kind of a strange way to do it. Work comes into you. You do that work. You get paid for it. Maybe you get like a 2-3 year contract to do a stream of work, right? But ultimately, it's basically a law firm model, right? Like, okay, we're going to provide you with 200 contracts every month or 1,000 contracts every month. Here are our playbooks. In fact, actually, you need to help us build these playbooks, right? Off you go. Right? That's so different to saying, well, okay, we've got some great software. Would you like to buy 1,000 licenses for it? And then we can go and focus on another law firm and try focusing on selling our software to them whilst you get busy using the stuff we just given you. So they're very, very, so selling in-house, it's a totally different, if you know, and this goes back to this point about AI companies that particularly sell to the in-house world. They start off saying, well, look, here's our software, now bye-bye. You know, I'm off to Aruba, you know, to buy a yacht or something, right? And the clients go, hey, don't disappear. We're going to need you because A, we don't have the staff or the expertise to handle this. And frankly, you know, we need you. We need you to hang around. And actually, by the way, do you have any spare bodies? Because we only have a team of like 20 people. And, you know, what you're proposing, the AI on its own isn't enough.
So to me, this model, again, I think it makes a ton of sense. I actually think it's a much more significant threat to law firms than is like a Harvey. Like a Harvey's trying to, at the moment, at least the way they're playing out, the Harveys and Legoras of the world are trying to empower the law firms. They're trying to sell technology to them, you know, to make them more innovative, to make them faster, to make them more efficient, to make them more productive.
It's the eat up of stuff that's not really very billable, that either is non-billable or it's barely billable. Or, I mean, for example, I'm not sure if it's public or not, there's one law firm in the top 50 in the UK that basically the head of innovation sent around an email saying, if you don't use AI in every matter, you have to explain why you didn't use it. And I said to someone I know at the firm, that's pretty radical. Aren't you going to lose out on revenue? And they said, no, we're absolutely snowed under with work. We literally cannot deal with it. There's so much work coming through the front door. So shaving off a little bit here and a little bit there just allows us to take on more matters. So it's cool. They have no problem with that.
Yeah. Well, and what I think is unique on the Robin side, and again, Robin, I think there's, you know, I think Crosby, Covenant. There are a number of these companies popping up. Some of them are venture backed, and then I've also spoken with plenty of lawyers who have left, and they use a lot of AI, and they consider their firm AI first. They intend to hire as if it's AI first, but it's just not venture backed. So I think that's going to be like something really interesting to watch. But it's easy to measure the ROI of these products, right? Because I used to pay a law firm to do this. And like, if you think about what you said, like when you pay a law firm, you're paying essentially 85% human cost, and you're paying 15% of that bill is like the tech, the infrastructure that those lawyers are using, but you're really paying for the people. When you're paying at Robin or any of the others for that matter, like 85% of what you're paying for is the tech. So as a result, it's going to be less. And I think
and the staff they have are there to make sure the job is done properly, and so that you're returning a solid product. Because going back to the early Law Geeks anecdote, was that the clients were saying, "Well, thank you very much, but we don't want a cake that's been cooked to 90% and then handed back, and then we have to recook the last bit because that's just a pain in the butt." Right? You need to finish it, and you need to finish it in a way where you can send it to us, and we are confident.
So something I heard at Ilticon, highly relevant to this. Someone at Ilticon told me that their firm, they felt pretty confident that their firm had one of the most successful rollouts of Harvey, and they had a couple of metrics to show me why that was the case. But they said the one thing is we really have not figured out how to measure ROI.
It's important. In very, very, I've spoken to some people, obviously many people over the years about this whole issue, and in very, very narrow, curated spaces, you can figure out ROI. But broadly, you cannot calculate the ROI of a machine that makes things faster when the environment in which it's in rewards time, right? They are mutually exclusive, and they're simply, so fundamentally, pretty simply, right? Law firms cannot calculate the ROI of efficiency productivity software. They just simply cannot, because the only way they'll see any measurable ROI will be in the areas where there are activities that are costing them money. And by paying for software, those costs are reduced. So unbillable research work, unbillable due diligence work, right? Which enables you can then say, well, by doing this more quickly, we get the cheap work, and it allows us to do more expensive work, right? But broadly, if you say, well, what about expensive work? So you're saying you only use AI for stuff that's not really very billable. Well, what's the point in doing that? So you spend all this money on all this,
Listen, I think you could look at realization rates, but it obviously is not working yet. But I think
that's a very, very, very good point, right?
Yeah.
And it's something I've started to spend more time thinking about, and that is that the write-offs from the clients are like 20 to 30%, right? And the billable rates go up every year, right? And the write-offs continue. And to some degree, you could argue that the fact that write-offs are so huge shows the strange sort of idiosyncratic world of law firm billing. Because law firm billing is meant to be really logical, right? It was introduced. Well, originally, as I think we probably talked before, it was originally introduced to act as an access to justice tool. But then in the 70s and 80s, because of higher leverage and the explosion of corporate activity, it became a profit-making tool, right? But also it allowed some sense of objectivity. So the buyer can go, oh, okay, so you spent, X amount of time on this and blah, 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 and here are all these little items, right? But then that completely falls apart, because if you're then writing off 20 to 30% of it, how does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense, does it? It's just like, so I've paid for a cake, but we're basically going to ignore 1/3 of the cake because it's irrelevant. But this third of the cake, you actually put just as much work into as the rest of it. So what's going on? That doesn't make it. And then you add AI into it, which is meant to be driving speed and efficiency.
So
and the whole thing just falls apart. You could argue that the billable hour is not just a terrible way of judging value. It's just like the emperor's new clothes. It really actually doesn't work. But if the other party believes in it, right? If the other party believes in it, then it does work. But it's like they've bought into this like mad myth.
It's this weird little dance. I would agree, but here's my point on measuring. First of all, I do think that there are products that have measurable ROI. And at the moment, again, I think products or companies like Robin, like Crosby, Legalmation, I think is another one. That's one I've invested in, where the ROI of using Legalmation, if you are a company that gets high volume, has high volume litigation, it gets inundated with lawsuit after lawsuit.
Yep.
Legalmation can save you 7 or 8 figures a year. Easy, right? I think that if you're comparing Robin to what, the sort of the speed, quality, and pricing of what you have been getting from a law firm, and then you compare the Robin product, it's an easy ROI to mention. The problem has been that up until for the last 3 years, there's been major appetites around an AI assistant. What we talked about last time, the fact that there is this new category of productivity software for lawyers. Those are not, I think they have an ROI. It's just not the ROI that firms care about. So like really, meaning like if I walk into a firm, to ask anyone at the firm, like what is the ROI of buying associates a second screen, or buying all attorneys a second screen on
or a more comfortable chair.
Or a more comfortable chair. It's like, well, because if you don't do these things that are basic professional thresholds, they're going to leave, go to a different firm. It's going to hurt your reputation. The people are going to think about you as being small time. So if you want to it's table stakes. If you want these type of clients, if you want this type of work, this is what you have to provide to your people.
And that is the great fear. The great fear, well, at least amongst the people who are really trying to drive change, is that this literally becomes what, I've called in some of my speeches, it's the IKEA catalog scenario where you just flick through it, and I'll have an Eudia shelving unit, and I'll have a woody lampshade, whatever, and it's all
the Billy bookshelf.
All of these different things, right? And it looks terribly nice, and you have these, big fold-out pictures. It looks wonderful, and you have that, and you decorate your law firm, and everyone's much, much more comfortable. But does it actually change anything? The structure of the house, the building, right? The architecture, the walls, the floors, the floor plan, it has not changed at all, really, right? So you've got a new sofa, you've got your buildy bing, whatever it is, right? It looks wonderful. Very nice. All the neighbors are impressed. And when you have a dinner party, they come over and go, oh, your IKEA bookshelf is extremely nice, right? Doesn't change anything. Doesn't change anything at all. And the reason why it can't is because as long as you see value fundamentally belonging to an artisanal process, then, and you don't hand off some of that artisanal process to an automated system for real, like when we talk about agentic stuff, then you're trapped. It remains decoration. It remains so you've got your hygiene factor, as you put earlier. You've got your decoration factor. You've got your marketing aspect. It's like, hey, we've got blah AI tool, and all the clients are like, well done, great. But by the way, we're completely happy by you raising your hourly rates by 10% this year. That's fantastic, wonderful, happy to do that. Anyway, let's carry on with the status quo. I think we are getting somewhere. And we are so further ahead than we were like when I started in 2016. We're so further ahead. And it's almost, to me, so much of this, it feels like D-Day. I don't know if you watch those sort of like, those movies about, before D-Day and everything,
World War II in color, one of my favorites.
Yeah. And like every,
you're talking about like Tom Hanks, like shaking, on his way onto like
you have like a sort of aerial shot from a Spitfire showing you like all the troops massed on, the south coast of Britain. They're all like raring to go. And then it never happens. And you're like, so are we ever going to do this? We've got like the biggest army, the biggest flotilla ever assembled in the history of mankind, right? Are we going to cross the channel and do this? And they're like, well, let me get back to you on that. And it's kind of like, so are you actually ever going to use this stuff for real? Really, really, really use it for real, and like really get into breaking down the way that you work and completely changing it, i.e. moving from a way of assembling vehicles, with a small number of machines, but mostly using manual labor, to go into a Toyota factory in Tokyo today, and it'll be 80% robotics.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
So I think where you're going to see a difference on this, and then I want to come back to this Arizona law firm bit. I think where you see a difference is not necessarily with incumbent companies. Meaning, I don't know if Coca-Cola is going to change their outside counsel to one of the AI first firms.
Not for high value work, no.
Not for high value work. I don't even know, and I don't know for any part. I mean, and by the way, the quote unquote, some of these companies are doing like fairly high value work. Now, I think in the case Legalmation has been able to get some of those customers, but that's because they offer something that's like really unique that I don't know if any other company does. But in general, I would agree with you. But what I think we are going to see, and this, I was listening to a podcast with the founders of Crosby, and they were, and there's something I knew about them. They're not working with the Coca-Colas of the world as much as they are the Windsurfs, the curse. I don't know if it was Cursor. Yeah.
They're working with the VC-backed Palo Alto darlings, right? Which they themselves effectively are part of that culture, and it makes total sense.
Of AI native and AI first, exactly.
It makes total sense.
And what I think, where I think a lot of the bigger firms are going to miss out, is they're going to miss out on those types of clients, meaning there's this huge exploding economy where, you know, Harvey can become a $5 billion company within 3 years. You know, you see just completely different magnitude and scale and speed of growth. But what kind of firms are going to service those clients? And my contention is that the AmLaw 1 in 200 could miss on a lot of those types of clients for their work because they now want to work with service providers that feel more like they do, that don't feel bloated. And I think
that would be a lovely idea. But then, you know, people could have said that about Facebook and Google and Apple. And I bet you, if you go through the records, you'll see.
Oh no,
years, all of their top advisors are massive names that we've all heard of.
Correct. And I by the way, I think for a lot of things that will continue to be true, except that I think that even in Facebook, this kind of culture of you don't need a huge team to build huge companies anymore. I mean, Surge AI is doing $1 billion in revenue, and they have not raised a dime of capital.
Oh, really?
This is crazy. Yeah, they're the main competitors scale. I just think that this is different. But I agree with you, and I've said before that I'll believe in all of this. Like, I'll believe that like law firms are in trouble when tech companies stop hiring them.
Well, I mean, for me, I mean, we will. It's not that difficult, right? We will know when things have changed when the average billable rate across the various segments of the AmLaw 100 go down, because it will cease to be a seller's market. It is still a seller's market. It's a seller's market times 1,000, right?
Yeah.
I was just looking at some data from Wolters Kluwer. I mean, in 2024, like certain segments of the AmLaw 100 put up average rates by 10%, right? At a time when every headline is screaming things like, you know, in-house counsel trying to do more with less. We've never had it so bad. It's so tough. Wow, AI will change everything. And then the law firm's just like, yeah, whatever. I'll have 10% extra actually. And the client's like, fantastic, let's do that.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting that at the beginning of this year, the ACC CLO survey, the results indicate that more than ever, clients felt like they were going to be sending more work to their law firms, not less.
Because there's more work. I mean, this is we have not reached peak big law by the same way we still, despite everything you read, we still have not reached peak oil, right?
Yeah. Well, do you think we're going to see any of the bigger firms themselves try to go AI first or AI native?
Well, so I mean, they might build out, and you know, let's say there are some really interesting projects going on. I mean, you know, Gravity Stack, and you know, Linklater has got its Creator IQ, and you've got a whole bunch of other ones doing interesting things. But what percentage of that is their total revenue? 1%, less than 1%. You know, out of a $2-3 billion, $1 law firm. I don't know, but it'd be interesting. If you talk to people who know a lot about the legal market, I mean, I was talking to Richard Maybe and Oz Ben-Amram, and both of them have said to me that they think that things are really going to change in about 2 years. They think that all of this is going to filter through and actually start to have a structural impact. I'm a lot more conservative. I think that we're probably looking at a decade, maybe longer, before it really, really actually starts to, put a spanner in the works. And the management committees of these huge law firms, these are $3 billion, $2 billion enterprises, right? Based incredibly, which is the most incredible thing, right? They're not selling like packaged products. They are primarily selling on reputation, because reputation is gigantic, because that's the insurance policy, right? And then secondly, on just simply personal expertise. And then third, you've got the sort of mechanical aspects. And we've got 300 junior lawyers in this particular team, and they will just devour like an army of ants all the work that you need to be. That bit may go in the years ahead, right? That it's the leverage bit that will go, but I do not believe ever, literally in 1,000 years from now, that those top law firms, that their top partners will not still be in demand. And who knows, in 10 years' time, the average charge-out rate for an equity partner at a white shoe law firm in New York might be $10,000. That'll be the average.
Yep.
Rate.
$10,000 hour. I do. No, I definitely believe it's coming.
Why not? I mean, some partners are already charging that.
So I want to get back to this, because I have a theory, but I want to get your impression.
Mm-hmm.
Axiom has Axiom Counsel, an Arizona law firm. We've seen Elevate Services started. I think I actually wrote an article that you wrote about this back when they started, where they had they were one of the first ALSPs. There are ALSPs that have Arizona law firms. Darrow is another company, not an ALSP, but their model, I believe also Just Point LLC, requires them to have either an Arizona firm or to work with an Arizona firm. So there are companies that have been doing this. You mentioned Law Geeks that had a similar. So what's so interesting to me is, why is this Eudia release getting so much coverage when this has been done before?
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, I think it's marketing to some degree.
Yeah.
I think it's the fact that, going back to the beginning, it's a legal tech company driving this. It's not an ALSP that's driving it. If Johnson Hanna, the ALSP that they bought, had said, "Hey, look, we're going to open a little branch office in Phoenix, Arizona," people would have said, "Oh, okay, that's quite interesting." But no big deal. But I think it's the fact that, and also Eudia has been very cagey about what they do publicly, and I think that's completely deliberate. It's the Harvey playbook, which is don't tell anybody what you do, mention some incredibly big clients, and everyone will just completely lose it.
Oh, yeah, it works.
The problem is that only lasts for so long, and then eventually people say, "Yeah, okay, that's good, but you do actually need to explain now." And
I think that
is engaging like every other legal tech company now.
So two things. I think that works better, first of all, with law firms. I think when law firms hear that other big law firms are using it, they feel like really like, oh my gosh, like we better look into this, as opposed to legal departments who don't really compete with other legal departments. They might hear about it and they might say, oh, that builds trust. Maybe I could see myself using something, but it doesn't create a sense of like, oh my gosh.
The legal departments of, Texaco is not competing. Maybe in their heads they are, but in financial reality, they are not competing with the legal department of BP. Right,
exactly.
Unless they're litigating against each other,
Yeah.
But generally they're not. They probably all go to the same conferences. They're all buddies. They probably work. They probably go back. There's probably like an express train between the two in-house groups, right? They'll be like 2 years there, 2 years there. The external lawyers, totally different. They are literally tearing each other's throats out.
Absolutely.
Totally different. And I think this is the fundamental difference. And that brings in the marketing bit. I mean, we, much as it's like, I think a lot of people don't want to talk about this aspect, but there is a lot of marketing going on here.
So by the way, I don't even think that's a bad thing. And I think that I think this is one of the most important things that companies can take from Harvey is that Harvey's growth is quite a bit a function of marketing. The thing is that what Harvey understood is lawyers are not going to are probably not going to use Chat GPT.
And they shouldn't, because
their
it's dumb to use it without any special safeguards.
depending for what. But in other words, at your law firm, we don't think that law firms are going to buy Chat GPT. Law firms are going to require their own special legal version of Chat GPT, and we're going to build and brand this in a way that lawyers will feel like we have specially catered to them in a way that meets their professional standards. And I think that Harvey does that exceptionally well.
And also,
I think,
I mean, I don't know if you remember, you saw all the job adverts when they launched, but, so half the, it's like, let's say 1/3 of the job adverts were for engineers, the other third was go-to-market sales team, and then the other third was for legal experts, actual real lawyers.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to help refine the outputs. Now, that's something that ChatGPT is never going to do. Right now, one of the interesting things, I've forgotten the acronym now, but what they do is that all of the LLMs, they have these teams out in the Philippines.
RHLF, reinforcement learning with human feedback.
Teams, right. Now, these people are not legal experts, right? And also, the other thing is that they don't have a direct link. They don't have a direct motorway straight into the heart of LexisNexis or straight into the heart of Wolters Kluwer or all these other databases. So, I mean, that said, a huge number of lawyers who use AI are just going to ChatGPT still. Why? Because it's free, basically. Why wouldn't you? Hey, summarize this email, summarize this document, help me write this, help me redraft this clause. For a lot of firms, that is good enough. Hopefully the smart ones have figured out by now not to do legal research on it. And they've also figured out don't put confidential information into it. But if, these are not, that's not rocket science. You just go, okay, so don't do legal research. And if I have a document, strip out all the client names before I stick it in. If you can do that, well, there you can use ChatGPT. I would still argue that if you could stump up the cash to actually get a license for a proper legal tech tool with its refinement, with its connection to data, with the fact that they actually probably employ lawyers inside their own business to help with the responses, that would be a much better buy.
I'm very interested to see where this is going to go, because I think this is going to be one of the big questions moving forward is where is going to be the bigger opportunity? These like AI first firms or firms using AI. And I think it's more interesting today and more nuanced and more developed and more mature significantly than it was a couple of years ago. And I think that we're going to look back at like ALSPs as really like the very 1.0 version of this. Maybe the 2.0 version is something like a Ramon or a Fisher Broyles, and 3.0 is going to be the AI first law firm. And I agree with you that you're not going to, this is not going to change like overnight.
No.
Entirely, but I think we're already seeing change. I mean, we've literally seen law firms introduce an entirely new category of software that they purchase. That's new. That didn't, like you said before, this didn't exist. So
look at I mean, one of the easy. I mean, I remember doing this before with a whole bunch of the early NLP ML companies that did due diligence. And a lot of the big AmLaw and Global 100 and UK 100 companies, law firms. They do a lot of transactions, right? So due diligence is a big piece of it. Therefore, QED, companies like Kira, this is like 2017, 2018, right? Luminance, others, right? Their revenue, right, should have been, their annual book of business should have been pretty chunky, right? I mean,
should have been.
Even in 2018, the global legal market must have been at least worth 800 billion, right? So if we're incredibly, incredibly conservative and say, okay, let's say the AI companies in the legal space get 0.5% of it, right? What is 0.5% of 800 billion?
It's a big number.
It's a big number, says two guys who probably should know, but I'll figure it out on a calculator. And
I turned off my phone beforehand. I can't.
Anyway,
this kind of I didn't go to law school for that, Richard.
We'll put it this way: 1% of 800 billion is 8 billion, right? And so let's say 4 billion, right? I probably got that wrong. Please do not send your answers in to Zach. I'm guessing it's 4 billion, right? You could put the entire legal tech market as an entire whole inside that number and it wouldn't touch the edges, at least back in 2018, right? In which case, what was going on? there wasn't enough buy-in. There was not enough buy-in.
Yeah.
Now things have changed dramatically. I mean, the last time they announced it, Harvey had got, 42 of the AmLaw 100. That's probably changed in the last couple of weeks already. By the end of the year, between them and Lagora and a whole bunch of others, virtually, I'm sure the whole AmLaw 100 and then probably the AmLaw 250 will be taken probably by the middle of next year. Every single one of those will have a preferred.
Very, very few will be doing nothing.
Yeah.
That will be
every single one of them will. Then you'll have your data, pioneer, leaders, your Lexis and your Westlaw, and then wrapped around those will be their productivity suites. Then you're going to, as we talked last time, you've got your VLEX and your Clio. Who knows what's going to happen there? And then you've got a whole bunch of other companies coming in, right? And then, effectively, we're going to hit market saturation. Right, TAM situation, saturation in, I would guess, 18 months, if not sooner. And then what happens?
I'll tell you what happens. We'll have to have Zach and Richard's third great legal AI adventure.
And absolutely, certainly probably before 18 months.
Yeah. All right, Richard, I'll see you next time. This is fun adventuring with you as always.
Fantastic.